Hey guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Bret Contreras back on the show. It's been a little while since I've talked to the glute guy, and today we're talking about all things range of motion as it pertains to muscle hypertrophy. As you guys are well aware, I've talked to so many experts in the field on this subject, and Bret feels that he has a slightly different take on the matter. He has seen the message that has generally been promoted out there. Actually, he dropped many individuals and the perspective he thinks that they are having, and they are communicating to the evidence-based space and the wider space in general. And he feels like there is a more nuanced discussion that needs to take place. It isn't as clear-cut as he believes these individuals are putting out there. I will say, and fellow listeners, if you have listened to the previous podcasts, I do think that the individuals he quoted aren't as steadfast as he believes their communication to be across potentially social media, but I still think there was some really fruitful discussion going over, particularly, for example, the glutes, with the 5 studies that have looked at the impact of range of motion on hypertrophy of those, and Bret's specific take, something that Bret did really well. He is an expert on the glutes. He is called the glute guy for a reason. He works hands-on with people to maximize their glute growth day in, day out, and has years of experience doing so very successfully. So I think as it pertains to the glutes, this is his space. So I do think it's worth listening to that sort of reason and voice. But without going into the entire podcast itself, it was a 2-hour chat. You'll enjoy it. I'll leave this here, and you guys will love it, no doubt.
This podcast is brought to you by MacroFactor, the smartest nutrition app on the market. Think of it like MyFitnessPal, but supercharged. It outperforms it in every single way. You just enter your details and goals, log your food, and wait. From there, MacroFactor fine-tunes your plan automatically, giving your body exactly what it needs to stay on track and reach your goals, without the guesswork. If you ever get paralysis by analysis and end up guessing what nutrition you need, you'll dig MacroFactor, as it will give you the science-backed targets individualized to you and your goals. Plus, it will adjust your calories just like a coach on a week-to-week basis to keep up with the changes in your metabolism. So ditch the outdated apps and get with the times. Download MacroFactor today and use my code STRONGER to get 2 weeks completely free via the App Store or Google Play, or find it linked in the description below. Now, with that said, let's get into today's show.
Bret, as you have seen, and I mean, lots of the listeners will be well aware of, because I've talked to so many people on this podcast about the range of motion impact on hypertrophy, and there's been quite a big push towards training at longer muscle lengths. Ever since 2022, Milo Wolf released his meta-analysis, and it kind of identified maybe a bit of a gap, and it became in vogue, and it's still in vogue today. And I think a lot of people feel like long muscle length training is the way to go, but I think you look at it slightly differently, or you have a slightly more nuanced perspective than many in the evidence-based space may have. So I'd love to hear you kind of dive into that a little bit. We can have a back and forth. I didn't know exactly where you wanted to start, but I thought that might just lay the groundwork.
So I thought I'd first just introduce so I have all the research. I made a slideshow. What people will be interested to hear is, like, most things in our field, like, you can find research dating back to like the 1950s and stuff, you know what I mean? But the first study on this topic was by Kubo in 2006. It was on isometrics. This field is not even 20 years old. So it's a very new field of study. And I hope we get into the physiology and biomechanics of it, because it's a very fascinating debate. But as far as like training studies, it's exploded recently. It's the most popular topic in strength and conditioning. Like, I'd say the fastest growing body of evidence. And a lot of that due to Milo, and there's kind of like 2 camps emerged. There's Brad gets so mad if I say this, but the stretch cult. I don't know who started saying the stretch cult, probably Paul Carter or someone, but they have this stretch cult, which is like the people who are in favor of longer muscle lengths, who would be like Milo and Pack, and then Brad, and then probably Mike Israetel in there. He's full ROM, but he's full ROM, but then he's also lengthened partial camp too, just not shortened. It's almost these guys are anti-shortened based training. That's the thing. That's what annoys the heck out of me. Well, Brad would say he's not, but then, you know, Brad's my best friend. Um, he I wouldn't say Brad. It's just that he collabs with every post on with like Milo and all these guys, so it looks like he's part of this crew. But Brad's not biased either way. I think what happens is we get biased. Like Milo, he brought this to the forefront, lengthened partials, you know, and it's almost like his identity. Like I was even watching his story last night on Instagram, and I'm like, I don't think he does full ROM in his own training ever. Everything's like he does dumbbell incline press. He does comes up, you know, half or three quarters of the way. Um, and it's kind of become his identity, similar to what people say about me. Like Bret invented the hip thrust, and he's been, you know, he's very biased towards shortened position exercises. Um, but I've always included lengthened training. Like my programs, God, I was just talking to my old coach from San Diego last night. And he's like, people think you're like, you know, shortened biased. I've been, you know, working with you since 2018, 2017. And he's like, we always did squats, lunges, deadlift variations, all the single leg exercise in existence. To me, it's about how to maximize recoverable volume, which we can get to. To me, that's the crux of the debate. But then the other camp, I would say, but also, I don't think these people know they're biased. Like I'm aware of my biases, you know, I don't think other people necessarily are. So anyway, then there's the other camp that emerged. I would say this is Chris Beardsley and Paul Carter's camp, the team neuromechanical matching crew, you know, and oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm getting all these text messages.
Too popular, Bret.
Well, no, I just listed my house and we made a video on it, and people are like, your house looks insane, because the videographer did the greatest job showing off my house. It looks crazy. But anyway, okay, so, and I just posted it right before we came on. So my apologies, I don't know how to silence these stupid texts. Okay, so I would say the neuromechanical matching crew is started from Chris and Paul, and it's really interesting for me to look at the industry, because I used to be more known as an evidence-based guy, you know, like because I was blogging all the time. And then as time went on, and I wrote for T Nation, I wrote about everything back in the day. I wrote about every muscle group. I was like, and Chris and I had a research review together, you know. As time has gone on, I kind of just went further into my niche. It's because of the algorithms. If I post about the pecs, it gets no views. It's like my followers are glute based, and to get any traction. And I'm not the type of guy that just posts for views, but we all pay attention to that. It's like, why make a post about, I love delts. For me, that's like my favorite muscle group to train. Fascinated by them, which I hope we talk about the delt study. But anyway, and my own experiences with like lengthened partials and stuff with delts. But the neuromechanical matching concept, I feel like I informed Chris Beards, and even like Andrew Vygotsky back in like 2015 when I started working with them. Maybe it was before then. Maybe it was like 2012. I was showing them these studies, and I was like, because I was studying the glutes, and I was like, I'm seeing insane results from hip thrusts, and they work at a short muscle length. And I'm noticing all these studies that show less EMG activity when you go deep in the glutes. I'm like, why would that happen? How come? And I was doing all this EMG testing. I'm like, how come with some muscles you get really high EMG activity and stretch, other muscles you don't? We still don't know the answer to that. And what annoys me is I feel like the stretch group, they don't want to acknowledge neuromechanical matching. Then how do you explain the Kubo study? Why did the adductors grow going deep? Glutes and adductors grow going deeper. Well, the adductors have better moment arms when you're deep down in a stretch. It's a very obvious, to me, it's a very obvious. I remember my first year of my PhD, I had to write this document, and I didn't call it neuromechanical matching, but I mentioned this phenomenon, and my reviewer came back to me and said, why would this be? And I go, well, why would why would the brain or the CNS not sense what muscle has better leverage and activate that muscle preferentially? That's to me very,
That's the
makes
crux of neuromechanical matching, right?
it makes sense. It's like the brain's going to activate the muscle that, and it wouldn't just be neuromechanical. Well, it wouldn't just be leverage. It would be a combination of kind of like line of pull and moment arm, and then also the sarcomere length and like how strong because muscles don't all just have the same exact resting sarcomere length position. So some get stretched more, others don't. That's why that's a lot of this debate by the neuromechanical matching crew. Also, what Chris and Paul kind of brought forth was like, does it operate on the descending limb or not? And I just don't feel like this is ever talked about by the stretch group. And they don't ever post studies that make memes about studies that disagree with their, for example, myself, when the Plotkin study came out, I made a big post saying I was wrong. I thought hip thrusts were going to smoke squats for glute growth. Hell, I funded the study with Menno. In fact, I thought EMG was going to predict glute growth. Daniel Plotkin tried to kick that part out of the study. He's like, well, I talked to Andrew. He said it's not going to. I talked to Andrew because he said it's not going to predict it. It's going to take a lot of time and energy. And I'm like, no, that stays in. If that's true, don't you want to know that? I'm like, I think it will predict muscle growth. But if it's not true, we need to know that. We need to have a study saying EMG does not predict muscle growth. And it didn't. And so I was wrong. I think I owe Daniel a beer next time I see him. So I made a post saying I was wrong. I've never seen any dude in the industry make a post saying they're wrong. Have you?
I think Milo might have done a video on, or Pac, one of them did a video on like we were wrong about something along the lines of we were wrong about lengthened partials because they did a study comparing full ROM versus lengthened partials and basically there was no difference between the two.
And to me, they said
that's a whole different discussion.
The Jeff Nipper study, they were like, we were right.
That's the one.
I don't think they said they're. Well, I'm not just talking about Milo. I like Milo, by the way. I think he's a good. I think he's seeks the truth. I just think he's biased. But not just this is about Mike. Everyone, Kaz, Chris Beardsley, Paul Carter, who are the evidence? Menno. I don't see people saying I was wrong. Lane. I don't see a lot of people saying, like when the Barbalo study came out. I looked at that, and this is where I realized this is going to sound. I don't want to sound. Whatever. When the Barbalo study came out, I remember I was at the LA Fit Expo, and I keep getting these text messages, and I'm like out presenting to people, shaking hands. And I have this long line of people wanting to take pictures with me, and I'm like glancing at my phone, and I read the abstract, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And then I look at the authors. I go, it says Paula Gentile. Paula Gentile's been bashing hip thrusts and me for years. This is a fake study. These results don't make sense. Then that night I got the full paper. I dive into it, and I'm like, they showed that the squat group gained more strength than the hip thrust group. That never happens in real life. Like that is the most obvious thing that's a fake study. So when everyone in the industry, like when all these people start posting and talking about the study, I'm like, this is really, really bad. Like you guys are so insanely ignorant about strength training. Like you have such little experience training anyone. So I train 60 people a month. Like I have 60 clients, but I've always been a trainer. These guys couldn't wait to get out of the gym. They couldn't wait to make it so they never had to train anyone ever again. I'm different. I couldn't wait to make it so I could have these big gyms and train people every day. We're different. You guys want to be in front of a computer all day long. I want to be in a gym all day long. We are different. I always will train people, so I know the practical side of things. So if you read that Barbalo study and thought it was legit, to me, you're the biggest idiot that ever walked the face of the earth. You are what's wrong with this industry. You could be sold by anything because you have no foundation. But these guys who were being like, oh, the Barbalo study, and it was all this like, I hate to tell you, I predicted this. I told you hip thrusts suck. And I'm like, you made posts saying hip thrusts suck, but then you didn't make a post when the Plotkins or when the industry discovered that the Barbalo study was fake and that like Barbalo's all his studies were fake. Did those guys then make follow-up posts saying I was wrong? Guys, I was wrong. I want to tell you, I made this post about hip thrusts. No, they hate hip thrusts because they hate me because I got so popular. It's just a jealousy thing. You look at who gets popular. Mike Israetel was loved. Now he gets so much hate now because he's so popular. He was loved. Now he's so popular, he gets more hate than almost anyone. It's sad. I read these things. I'm like, geez, this is mean. Criticizing his physique. It's everyone's just jealous. And I was so popular in the late 2010s, and everyone hated me and they hated hip thrusts. And now I'm still popular numbers wise, but I don't go as viral. I'm not the center of things anymore, so I don't get as much hate. I'm not as polarizing, so I don't get as much hate anymore. So I feel like this industry has a serious problem because men can't admit they were wrong. Did any one of those guys, when the Plotkin study was published, say, hey guys, I was wrong. Turns out hip thrusts are really good at growing the glutes. They're on par with squats. They tied squats for glute growth. Hey, wow, I'm surprised. I was the only one who made the post. That's when all these guys start now criticizing the squat. Why didn't they criticize the squat in the Barbalo study? They were like, well, the squat's really not a glute exercise. It's a quad exercise. And I'm just like, now you just moved the goalpost. Now it's not even a study used. They'll say, now the stretch group will say, well, that study can't be used to say whether like lengthened training is better for glutes because it's two different exercises. Well, you guys were the ones who said it sucks because it doesn't. You were the ones who said hip thrusts suck because it doesn't work you in the lengthened position. So all I see is goal shifting. To be honest, it's terrible science. And when you don't have to bash an exercise to praise another exercise. So that's what bothers me about social media. You can say, hey, make sure you do your lunges, make sure you do your step-ups, make sure you do your single leg RDLs or something because it works the glutes in the lengthened position. You don't have to say hip thrusts suck, especially that was my problem with Mike Israetel, starts bashing hip thrusts. He didn't bash them that much before. You would start bashing hip thrusts after Plotkin and Cassiano came out. And now there's Bartholomew, which we can talk about. But we finally have evidence showing that they matched lengthened exercises. Any good scientist worth their salt would say, wow, I was wrong. But you start bashing them after that, you are not a good scientist. Plain and simple, you are a terrible scientist. Anyone who says that. Right now, if anyone says, like, with glutes, lengthened training is better than shortened training, all right, let's weigh the evidence. We've got, anytime you look at one exercise, you look at quarter squats versus deep squats, Kubo 2019, right? Shallow squats versus deep squats beat them out for glutes. Well, that's obvious. They're newbies. They're, newbies, they do high bar, they just bend their knees. Well, what if you did low bar, leaned forward and sat way back? Sumo got a comfortable stance, sat way back, you use your hips a lot. Well, they just looked at knee angle in that study. So to me, the Kubo study has asterisks next to it because they just define knee angle. Okay, so newbies doing quarter squats use all quads. I did when I started squatting. Do you remember when you started squatting, you didn't go deep. You put the high bar, and you stayed as upright as possible, and you just did forward knee bend, and you felt it all in the quads.
It's very foreign movement for sure.
But these guys, you'll never see them criticize a study that matches their bias. But they'll criticize the hell out of ones that don't. Like the Plotkin study was an amazing study. And then I'll hear, well, the squat's a quad exercise. Okay, what next? What do you want to study? Like Cassiano, okay. So then you look at, and then this Mao paper, it was actually a conference abstract in 2023. Why hasn't it been published? It's been 2 years, Why isn't it published? And who the hell does straight leg kickbacks? but they'll use the Mao conference abstract. One group did straight leg kickbacks. The other group, group did lengthened partials. The other did full range. We haven't even seen the full paper, but yeah, it never got published. I mean, maybe it does surface, but who does straight leg kickbacks? We do kickbacks like no one does more kickbacks than my group, my squad. I've never done a set of straight leg kickbacks in any client ever. In all my years of training people, you bend the knee. So straight leg, if you do straight leg, you're not going to be able to get as high. You're not going to go as deep. And also they went to 0 degrees. They went to neutral. But think of stopping at neutral on the kickback on the multi-hip. You move back way further. You kick back. I mean, your posture is different. Maybe you tilt your pelvis, but you kick back 45 degrees. I'm not saying people have 45 degrees of hip hyperextension mobility. I'm just saying that's a partial versus a partial. But anyway, the lengthened partial group saw better results. But there's this huge, massive, monumental, like elephant in the room. This, potential confounder. It's that like all these studies look at newbies. Almost all of them. I have all the studies. They all look at newbies, and newbies experience more sarcomerigenesis in series. Like that's a thing. That is a thing. The Jeff Nippert study looked at advanced subjects and it did not see a benefit from lengthened partial to full range. So what if all these studies are just like something that happens in beginners and then it fizzles out? We need more studies on advanced subjects. But yeah, back to the overview. First studies published 19 years ago. This field is not even 20 years old. Until 2020. So in the beginning, it was isometrics. The Kubo study was isometrics. It was usually on like leg extensions, or one group does them at a long muscle length, one group at a short muscle length. And this was 19 years ago. And then it was like, and then back then people wanted to do partials. It was like, partials were popular back then. It was always shortened partials. Lengthened partials weren't even a thing till Milo came around, right? Like, no one did lengthened partials really. And so there were, up until 2020, up until 5 years ago, there were only 11 studies. They were all on isometrics and shortened partials versus full round, like doing quarter squats versus full squats.
Right.
And there
Sorry.
were 3. Go ahead.
When you say no one did them, you mean within the research, right? Because like within the gym, people were
lengthened partials?
Like old school bodybuilders doing like these presses and not
But
knocking out, and
like, yeah, you're right. Good point. Very good point. You look at every bodybuilder and they would just do like half range.
Yeah.
Good point. What I mean is the research, but also kind of like none of the authors on T Nation, none of the writers, we never said just do bottom half. If we said partials, you knew a partial was always short and ROM. You know what I mean? It wasn't, you didn't even have to clarify. You just said partials. Partials meant with bench press, you did floor press, you did board press, you did rack press. You never had to clarify which type of partial, lengthened partial or shortened partial. So anyway, good point. Always interrupt me. And if you do for points like that. Okay. So now there are 44 studies. Okay. And 15 review papers. So meaning 33 studies have emerged since 2020 on this topic and 12 reviews. This is crazy. This is an explosion of research surrounding this topic. So hats off to like Milo made this a thing. But whenever you make something too much of a thing, like maybe I did this with hip thrust back in the day, you get backlash. So I think that's what created, I think Milo and the group were too hardcore about too hardcore about, and Mike, full ROM, and then Milo, stretch position, everything. And then you get some pushback. And then Chris Beardsley and Paul Carter start pushing back against it. And I will say, Paul Carter it's funny because you look at the science-based industry, who has the most followers? Probably Jeff Nippert and then Jeremy Ethier, right? Like,
I guess Mike Nippert, on YouTube is up there with Renaissance Periodization.
Mike's up there on YouTube, but they have like 7 million, don't they? I don't know. I can't make a dent with YouTube. I spend so much time on these videos and it gets like 10,000 views. And I'm like, this is not worth my time. I think because I started in 2009 on YouTube, if the algorithms are like, we show it to your like a portion of your followers, I got half my followers like, 15 years ago. Some of them are probably dead. Like you show them to them, they're not going to look at it. So anyway, so I YouTube these guys and like Jeff and Jeremy, they fly under the radar. They don't get criticized. They're like everyone loves them because they just report the research. They don't stick to one hard group,
Sure.
Whereas guys who are more polarized, who pick a side, pick a camp. But it's funny because I think Paul Carter is the secret weapon. He's the most influential dude in the industry. And you know why? Because he doesn't have the followers that they do. But Chris Beardsley has a way of, so when Chris Beardsley and I did the research review together, he just reported research. Like it was just, here's a study, here's the findings. And then over time, he got comfortable the guy reads so much. He's so smart. He reads a ton. But he got bolder and then he started saying, muscle growth is just mechanical tension. It's not related to muscle damage and metabolic stress. These are dead theories, and then Paul Carter makes it so simple. Hypertrophy is so simple. It's just mechanical tension, do this split, do these rep ranges. It's obvious. And if you don't do this, you're an idiot. You are a freaking moron. PhDs are morons. And then the younger crowd loves to hear this. Oh, I don't have to get a PhD. PhDs are morons. I'm smarter than the PhDs. So they cling to this. And remember, like, it's funny because Kaz had no problem with Paul Carter when Paul Carter was Team Kaz. Because I'm like, what the hell? I remember I've known Paul forever. And I'm like, you were just posting like sumo leg presses work the glutes really well. And then you meet Kaz and now sumo is all adductor. I'm like, it still works the glutes. You can work adductor and glutes. It doesn't mean hip extension is not occurring. Like just because you have a wide stance, you're still using glutes. Everyone knows this. Do sumo squats and deadlifts, you feel your glutes working a lot. Yes, they're not stretched as much, but that doesn't mean, we don't have a study. So many studies we need to conduct, which on glutes, but we don't have like ass to grass versus parallel squats. We don't have sumo versus conventional. We don't have, there's so many studies that still need to be conducted. But anyway, Paul is so influential because he makes things so simple. When I've been reading, I read more hypertrophy research than probably any personal trainer in the world. I don't think I read as much as like some of the professors do because they're at their computer all day long. But every single night of my life, I read research, like I sit, that's part of my nightly routine. I try to read at least a couple studies a day or glance over them at least. And I stay current with the literature. And I will tell you, I wish I could just like transfer what I know onto, God, I don't remember the studies. I've just come across so many studies. There are so many pathways. It is so not as simple as people make it out to be. And then I look at these younger influencers that are like, hypertrophy is very simple. And I'm like, all right, you could say it's simple because like, oh no, I could take a step back and go, look, stick to the basic exercises and get freakishly strong at them. Utilize progressive overload, train this way, train full body 3 days a week, focusing on these 6 exercises and get very strong at them. You could even say stick to a moderate rep range because high reps, do they get you more sore? I think they do. It's not reflected in the long-term literature though, but longitudinal doesn't show a difference. But if you do train frequently, things have to change a little bit. You don't want to be sore. If I do high rep seated hip adductions, I can do the stack for 70 reps. That gets me sore, 1 set. But if I do 3 sets of 8 with 200 pounds pinned to the stack, I don't get sore. I know soreness does not perfectly equate to muscle damage, but it does interfere with my workout. If you're sore, you are not going to have as good of a workout usually. So in that sense, it's very simple. But the science of hypertrophy is very nuanced. It's very complicated. We don't have We don't know crap. We don't know the path. We don't know we know a lot of the pathways. We don't know the individual on the molecular level. We know mechanosensing takes place. We know tension takes place, but we don't know which exact structures. Is it certain structures like Titan? Is it way more complicated? Or is it every structure? Is it every part of the muscle cell? Is it, the extracellular matrix, the cell membrane, all the parts inside in the nucleus? Can all of them sense different types of mechanical stimuli? If 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 it's just stretch, then if it's just stretch activated, then why aren't people that stretch the most jacked people? Obviously, you need to activate the muscle. If you can grow muscle through static stretching and through electric muscle stimulation through EMS, static stretching is passive without active stimuli. EMS is active without passive stimuli. Clearly, that shows that there are multiple, pathways, and activation and stretch both signal growth. We don't know if it's, you look at this paper done by Henning Wakaraj, and Brad was on it back in, I think, 2020. Maybe it was, yeah. And it was stimuli and sensors with like hypertrophy. We don't know. We don't know the sensors. What precise structures sense hypertrophy? Is it nuclear flattening when the nucleus flattens out due to like being stretched, being activated? How does being activated does Titan need to be activated to really signal growth? How does that change things? And what about just activation itself without stretch? How does that grow? Is that something in the Z disc? Is it, bag 3 filament C? Is it something else? It could be all the parts of the muscle cell, all the different, it could be all of them. We don't know. We don't know. And anyone who pretends they know is a charlatan, because I can admit I read more than anyone almost, and I don't know. And Brad Schoenfeld will tell you we don't know much at all. And any, like evidence-based guy would tell you that. So I look at people, I'm like, man, why are they trying to act like they understand hypertrophy? The more I study it, the more I admit I don't know. Okay, so going back to the categories now. Now this debate is not just this lengthened debate. It's not just more stretch. It's also more torque in the stretch. So now the first studies were on isometrics, lengthened versus shortened isometrics. Then came shortened partials versus full ROM. Like I said back then, it was a partial was always shortened. So then in 2020 with Milo, you have a new categories explode. These are lengthened partials versus full ROM, lengthened partials versus shortened partials. More length. That's like the lying versus seated leg curl. That's just, they're not partials. You're doing full range. One gets you more stretch. If you lean forward during a leg curl, if you're in hip flexion, you're going to stretch the hammies more. So that's just, I call it more length. Then you have more length and torque. You could do two types of curls. One type of curl puts more, torque in the stretch position, one less torque in the stretch position. You could use a cam. You could use like those prime machines are a good example of that. Like you can augment they call it the resistance challenge, the resistance profile, but it's basically changing the torque angle curve. So more length and torque. Then there's more length versus more length and torque. There's actually 6 studies in this category. It's a lot of them are like incline curls versus preacher curls, or like Bayesian curls, whatever. Like it's, you know what I mean? It's incline curl stretches your biceps more, but preacher curl puts more torque in the stretch position.
Yeah.
So that's a category of its own. Then you have more length. Yeah, so more length and length and torque. These are the glute studies. The glute studies have more length and more length and torque. So back to what I said earlier. I know I'm just hopping around. readers are going to be so annoyed at this. Sorry, I'm not very organized, but the listeners, I mean. But the glute studies, there's 5 of them that are really guide us in this. If you look at one exercise, squats or kickbacks, you see greater results in the stretch position. But if you look at the comparison on exercises, the studies comparing exercise, there's 3 worth talking about. Plotkin 2023, squats versus hip thrust, they tied. There's Bartholomew 2024, squats and step-ups versus hip thrusts and reverse hypers, they tied for glute growth. Both of these studies showed greater quad growth. Plotkin showed greater adductor growth. So again, to me, that's neuromechanical matching with the adductors. The deeper you go, the more adductors you're going to work. And then Cassiano 2024. And I remember Cassiano, I think we emailed or DM'd or something. I'm like, they didn't match volume. So people, the lengthened group says, oh, that doesn't matter. That's just more volume. But you look at this, and this should be talked about more. This can't be ignored. Because I remember telling this to Brad, and he's like, well, that's just volume. But more volume doesn't keep going. I mean, they know this. Everyone knows more volume just doesn't keep adding muscle linearly. So if one group, and I think Andrew Vygotsky was a reviewer of this paper, and he said he thought that was important. Like this needs to be, this is a big deal. If you see that leg press and stiff leg deadlifts get you to say 6.2% glute growth, muscle thickness growth, and then you add in the hip thrust and it gets you to 9.3%, that's perfectly linear. Like theoretically speaking, we can't know this, but leg press got you 3.1%, stiff legs got you 3.1%, and then hip thrust got you another 3.1%, meaning they're at least all equal. But because one group did leg press and stiff legs, the other group did leg press, stiff legs, and then added on 2 sets of hip thrusts afterwards, you might not expect linear growth. You saw the same growth. That means hip thrusts are at least as good as leg press and stiff legs, or better, because you would think hypertrophy would taper off. Anyway, I've never seen any of that group acknowledge these papers, like acknowledge like what I'm saying, acknowledge the limitations. And by the way, I know I'm biased. I invented the hip thrust, so I deep down want, you never want to eat crow. No one wants to, so that's what makes this tough. Like, we're not just scientists. If there was no social media and we just worked in labs and all we cared about was science, you know what I mean? And we published papers and we talked, then we wouldn't be as biased. You become biased when you get known for something, when you push something, you kind of like, when I funded the Plotkin study, I was hoping hip thrust came out above. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That you have humans, I always say science is theoretically perfect, but humans fuck it up. Sorry, can I say the F word?
Go for it.
Okay. Humans mess it up because of our biases and our limitations. And also, like, I always say this, like in research, everything has its flaws. You want to tell me EMG has its flaws? Yes, it does. Guess what? So does, like, force plate research. Like, the more force, okay, just do a short and partial. You have more force, so take advantage of the mechanical advantage. Does that mean it's better for growth? Look at musculoskeletal modeling. It's rife with assumptions. It's crazy. That has major limitations. You look at longitudinal research. You're assuming the researchers know how to coach the exercise. That's why they don't post pictures and videos all the time. And that's why I got to give my hats off to these newer researchers. Plotkin showed all the pictures of the squat depth. And then Milo and Pack showed all the videos of them training people, the videos of that's great. You never saw this back in the day. And I've been telling research, like, I get so annoyed when I go pull up a study and I can't find a picture of the exercise. That means the researchers are so insecure about their form, they don't want it to be shown. They want to describe it. Because sometimes this happened once. Andrew Vygotsky and I, this was like 2015, we saw the exercises in the description, and then Andrew recognized the name from Instagram. So we went on the girl's Instagram page and we saw the form, and nope, it was a hip thrust study. They weren't locking out. They were doing they were doing lengthened partials, which is kind of funny to think of with hip thrusts. We always said you didn't lock out your hip thrust. What if that was better for muscle growth?
Mm.
And we do need a study on hip thrust lengthened partials. Jeremy Ethier is funding a study on, he and I funded a study. We haven't had the results back, but it's on the kickback, the prime kickback machine, less torque in the stretch versus more torque at end range. My guess it'll come back like the Plotkin and the Kubo and the Mao papers and show that it's better for glute growth to put the torque in the stretch. But then it's just a weird phenomenon when you do the training studies, the Plotkin, the Cassiano, and the Bartholomew papers. And the Bartholomew study was interesting because they did it was almost like for athletics. They did low reps, heavy weight, low reps. I can't remember. I think the end of the training study was like 3x3 or something. How do you 3x3 barbell step ups? Like that's, and then 3x3 reverse hypers?
And these were newbies, or they weren't trained either.
I think they might have been trained.
Still, even as a trained lifter, step up.
Yeah, no, I know I would fall. But it's interesting with this could just be some artifact like measurement error, but the echo intensity on the glute, the hip thrust and reverse hyper group for the glutes was through the roof. And I don't know what that could mean. Theoretically, here's something. I don't want to forget this, so I'm jumping all over the place. I want to make a post on this. Because I'm like, I think there are review papers on this, but I looked at every study I could find on band and chains, like accommodating resistance, but also different resistance and different torque angle curves. So if you think about it, squats and step ups, they work you hard in the bottom position, then they get easier as you come up. We always thought that was good for athletic performance. Sarcomerogenesis is good. You have less length change the muscle can function more isometrically. But then during movement, like sprinting, even during the Nordic ham curl, the hamstring doesn't change much length. It almost functions like quasi-isometrically, and the length change is taken up by the tendons. And you're like, how the hell does this? It's so the muscle can be stronger. It's what we think happens is so different than what happens when you study this stuff in real life, in vivo. Muscles, people get very efficient. The length change taking place in the tendons during athletic movement, like sprinting. You think the hamstrings are getting so much, and then you look at a lot of times the muscles aren't stretching as much as you think they are. But anyway, with the accommodating research and the studies on hip thrust versus squats, there's now 9 papers. 8 studies on hip thrust versus squats. Then if you look at adding more components, and there's more. But anyway, the Bartholomew paper, I would say, and also a ton of research on horizontal versus vertical plyos. So what's different than hip thrust versus squats? Hip thrusts are harder than range. You have to accelerate it. You do a heavy hip thrust, you don't go slow and try to count your seconds. You have to explode up, or you're not going to lock that out. You have to explode during a hip thrust. It's like using bands and chains. You have to explode up, or you got to be more explosive. Every one of the studies I could find, either it was a tie or a benefit for almost all of the accommodating resistance, and all the hip thrust papers show better sprint gains or power gains, like jump, sprint. No, not with hip thrust versus squats. Hip thrust will get you more sprinting speed. They'll tie the squat group. There's a review paper on this. Horizontal tends to outperform vertical hip extension exercises for sprint speed and for outperform for sprint speed, and also kind of lateral agility and stuff, but ties for vertical. So for sports, it seems like the hip thrust is a superior exercise to squats. And for performance, if you look at the 8 individual papers and then the broader research on combined exercise, and then plyos and vertical versus horizontal plyos, and then if you tie in the accommodating resistance, it's very clear to me that adding bands and chains, making it easier in the stretch, harder in the squeeze, is better for performance. So isn't that fascinating to think that what's best for hypertrophy is the opposite of what's best for performance? And what does that mean? Muscle growth isn't that important for performance because squats grow the quads and the adductors better than hip thrusts. That doesn't make a difference. Like that has to matter. Muscle has to matter, right? But it's not just the muscle. It's also there's a study showing two studies showing accommodating resistance improves your reflexes, your your reaction times, and it could be something about that explosion. When I do hip thrust, think of the hip power going on, the force times the velocity, or like the torque times the velocity is through the freaking roof. I can do 585-pound hip thrusts. Well, I've never done them. I always did them explosively because I want to use the glutes at the bottom position. I want to explode up and then still lock it out and like really get full range. But I'm trying to make it, momentum makes a huge difference. And so hip thrusts, if you do it on like a thruster pro, you do go pretty deep and you explode up and do it heavy. But actually, God, this is so funny. We're talking about this because I'm having my guy, one of my workers, he just texted me earlier today. We're making this, I don't know if you can see this. This is a thruster pro, and we have this crazy arms on it.
Oh
So you
yeah,
can put the weight in the top or the bottom. So I want to do a
kind of like the
study,
prime.
kind of like the prime, and where
Yeah.
it's so theoretically you've got if you load it up at the bottom, it's 50% less loading at the bottom compared to the top. And if you load up the top, it's 50% more loading at the top at the bottom compared to the top. And see, for hip thrust, should we be doing lengthened partials on? And we could also do a partial lengthened versus shortened partial versus full on. But it's just interesting that the individual exercises literature does not match the like the combined exercise versus shortened versus lengthened literature for glute growth. So we need more studies, and I wouldn't be surprised to find in time, I wouldn't be surprised to find that yes, the lengthened position is superior when you pit them against each other. But I think hip thrusts are just so good. Like, I found like with hip thrusts, single leg hip thrusts never activate the glutes as well as double leg. Because when you squeeze the glutes so hard at the top, your hips kind of turn out a little bit. They externally rotate. When you do single leg, it kind of throws that off. Double leg hip thrusts are just so good at like progressive overload. I think it kind of compensates for the length, the greater. And I think what we'll find is hip thrusts don't quite work you as well. The hip thrusts, right? Here's my theory. Neuromechanical matching, right? The adductor magnus is a huge hip extensor. It's maybe a strain protection. If you activated the glutes maximally in the deep stretch, maybe it would get strained more often. The glute max doesn't get strained much at all. So it could be something for strain protection. It could be neuromechanical matching. The glutes, when you go down to the bottom of a squat, the glutes don't have the best moment arm. You have the hip joint center, the glutes, the leg comes up and it's flattened out. It kind of wraps underneath it gets smaller, and then at end range it gets larger, and the insertion angle is more perpendicular. So it could have to do with that. It could also have to do with the resting sarcomere length and the length tension curve, the length tension relationship. We don't know. It hasn't been done for the gluteus maximus yet. So it could be that, on these, when you use musculoskeletal modeling, when you use this software called OpenSim, there were two different models. This is going to be so above and beyond, but there's Rajagopal 2015, and then there's Catanelli 2019. They have different parameters. The only difference is they put like spheres in the glute, and this is what I sent this to Kaz, and Kaz geeked out on it so bad, and he figured out that the main difference was the
Sounds like his
tendon.
thing.
Yeah, I know. The tendon slack length was different, and it's these researchers just trying to fit the model to the data, like, So anyway, through that, Kaz and I realized there's issues with every type of research. But anyway, you with the Rajagopal, you have peak tension in the glutes at around like probably like 10 degrees of hip flexion, so mostly neutral. 15 degrees of hip flexion, that's like mostly neutral. That's where you get peak active, but also you don't have, in these models, it does not show much passive tension. You think of the length tension, what the graph, and you'll see like active tension like this, and then passive tension like this, and it goes way high and it greatly exceeds active tension. With both of these, but then the Catalini model, Catanelli or whatever, it was used to model deep hip flexion. It has peak tension in the glutes occurring at around 45 degrees of hip flexion, so deeper. But in both those studies, passive tension never goes up much. Well, we need to know this. We need to look at, like, where do you get peak tension in the glutes? And where's peak active tension? Where's peak passive tension? Does passive tension exceed? We also just need to know how it all works. Like, what does this mean for hypertrophy? Because like Chris Beards and Paul Carter have stated that if the muscle doesn't operate on the descending limb, the listeners are going to be like, what the hell does that mean? It's complicated, but basically tension plateaus, and then you got the plateau region, you've got the ascending limb, the descending limb with force production, and so it's a complicated topic. We don't know the answer to that. We don't know if tighten need to be activated. If you get down to the bottom of squat and it's not activated high, does tighten detach from actin? We don't know these things. No one knows the answer to these things. So quit trying to act like we have all the answers and just admit, right now for glutes and like delts, we got one delt study, Larson, and it looked at dumbbell laterals versus cable laterals, and they tied for delt growth. Now you could say, looks like the cable had a little bit better distal growth, and maybe the dumbbell had a little bit better. But I'm tired of hearing like people say, well, dumbbell lateral is all here and nothing here. Tell me how you get it to here using a 40-pound dumbbell. You know what I mean? Like, I've done 40 pounds for 20 reps. I'm heaving. I'm not going like super strict 40 pounds.
Yeah.
I have to go, that is,
This is old school bodybuilding again.
Yeah. When I get to here, I don't just let go and go, and then raise it. It's not like when you do a deadlift or a hip thrust where you can actually just let the gravity do it all. I don't just let gravity. I'm and having to reverse it here. I feel it right here. I feel it down here, reversing it. So it's not as simple as like just looking at the instantaneous, torque at that position. But since they tied, we don't know. We need more studies, I think. And then here's what I think for the Plotkin study and the Larson paper. When you have two exercises that tie, then what's the better exercise for hypertrophy? The one that doesn't beat you up as much. Hip thrusts don't beat you up as much as squats. Everyone knows that. I mean, if you're a real trainer, if you're a phony Instagram trainer, you don't know these things. You're pretending you've never trained someone in real life. I look at the last, decade. I've had the injuries that occur with hip thrusts no one hurts their low back, their knees, their hips. That's very, very rare. It's the bruising on the thighs, because the girls get so freakishly strong. They have to chill some days, and you have to have a protocol for that, because they're bruises. They can get lumps and stuff there, and you got to let them subside. That's the real danger of hip thrusts. You don't get like chronic, like with squats and deadlifts, where you get catastrophic injuries where you're like, my back is messed up. But anyway, it goes to the exercise where you can do more volume on and more recoverable volume on. Hip thrust trumps squats for that purpose. I'd love to hear the guys talk about that, because that's so obvious to everyone listening to this, but it's never acknowledged by the scientific people. Like, you need to talk about this. This matters. If I said, like, curls build your biceps as much as chin-ups, chin-ups are with like weighted chin-ups. Weighted chin-ups are freaking hard as hell. They beat the crap out of you. They beat up your joints, especially if you're a big guy. You can't just do, 30 sets of weighted chin-ups a week, but you can do tons of curls. And if curls are shown to grow similar growth, like similar biceps growth with different types of curls, yes, the variety seems to matter. Preachers tend to grow, versus incline curls. But what I'm saying is like the length doesn't matter as much as like, if you're trying to maximize growth, but I have 2 points I still want to make with this. With the Larson paper, the cable, you can get deeper in the cable. You can get to here. You can stretch more, and you can kind of position yourself to put more torque in that position, So to me,
Like the
you can't change two
crossbody
variables.
variation.
You can't change variables. They had to equate range of motion, and you're just changing the torque angle curve, dumbbell versus cable. So, dumbbell easier here, harder here, cable harder here, easier here. They tied, but what if you would have went more range? What if you would have, but I don't ever have anyone hurt themselves with cable lateral raises. Dumbbell lateral raises can beat you up over time, especially if you're using some momentum and heaving around. Cable laterals are the safer exercise. Therefore, cable lateral raises are the superior choice for delt growth, because dumbbell lateral raises, and it might not matter if you do dumbbells very strict and slow tempo with lightweight, but when you get to where you're trying to use the 50 pounders, and you're having to use some momentum and they jar you a little bit, Cable, I can't explain it. Even when you're trying to use progressive roll and go heavier, it doesn't seem to beat you up as much. But now,
On that, Bret, just very quickly, practical note: do you like cuffing those? Cuffs have become really popular.
Yeah.
How are you
No,
feeling about that?
I remember the first time I ever used cuffs. My delts were burning so bad. Nothing felt comfortable. Like my delts were burning so bad. I'm like just standing here, they're burning. So I tried to put them up on a machine, on the top of a machine. I'm like, oh my God, please go away. This burning is unbearable. I
I've
love
never had
cuffs.
that in my delts.
Yeah, really. I want to
Quads.
talk I want to talk specifically about delt training in a minute, because I believe lengthened partials grew my delts. Even though the literature doesn't necessarily support it, but I want to talk about it in a minute. But here's what I wish we could do as an industry so we could all get along. How cool would this be? So Mike Israetel, you want to fund this with me? Count me in. Yeah, like we need to do this study. One group, say you pick three muscles. Okay, say it's pecs, glutes, and hammies. One group is stretch only. So they say they train the muscle twice a week or 3 times a week, but they only do, for the pecs, it's only the deepest and the torque like they do dumbbell flies, because that has the most torque in the stretch. They do dumbbell bench press, so you can go deeper. They do like
Dips, partials.
dips or push-ups, where you're push-ups off of handles, we use the inverted row. We use the parallel bars, but you could just use those push-up handles off the ground so you can go extra deep. Or even like if you did bench, you'd use a cambered bar to go even deeper, or a buffalo bar, some only lengthened, the most lengthened stretch and lengthened torque, like the dumbbell flies. You're not going to do pec deck, because pec deck is hard here. It's kind of easier here. So they do, say, 3 stretch exercises Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever. Maybe that's too much. Monday and Thursday. And then for hamstrings, they do all stretch. So it's good mornings. It's like deadlifts. It's seated leg curls. And then for glutes, it's, pick 3: squat, lunge, step up, split squat, Bulgarian, lunge, deficit lunge, RDL. Pick any one of those. And then the other group does, like, say, 2 stretch exercise and 1 squeeze exercise. So instead of doing, like, say the dumbbell fly, they do the pec deck to here, or hammer strength converging chest press, or and then the hamstring group does a lying leg curl instead of a seated leg curl. And then in the glute group, instead of doing all three stretch, they do two stretch and then hip thrusts with a pause at the top, focusing on the squeeze or something. Do you really think it's going to make much of a difference in the grand scheme of things? And if you talk about longevity, who's going to last longer? I know Milo would say, because I watch him train, he'd say the stretch doesn't matter as much. Oh, sorry, it's not as, it doesn't beat you up as much. It doesn't. We do have research showing it has more muscle damage. It inarguably creates more joint, like the reason why squats and deadlifts injure everyone is because they're so fucking good at the stretch position. You know what I mean? There's so much compressive forces on the spine. I mean, the compressive on the lift off of the deadlift is insane. Like the compressive and shear forces on the lumbar spine, the hip joint compressive forces, when it's hard in the stretch, it's also hard on the joints. I'm not saying it's not hard on the joints in the lockout, but I'm just saying that's when people, I think it's very obvious that when you train for longevity, people start, I'm 48, I'm gonna be 49 in like 2 weeks. So I'm nearing my 50s. You start to use more hammer strength machines that are harder in the squeeze. You start to do a little more volume with machines, and like if we had bands and chains, we'd do that more. If that were like, say we were using free weights, you can do more, you can recover better. So I do think that if you did that study, that's with volume equated, then you'd get your answer. You'd say, wow. And in trained individuals, because we don't want sarcomeres and series to be a factor. In trained individuals, did it matter for muscle growth? And if it doesn't, then everyone needs to shut up about this debate, because you should do them both. All we need to tell people is make sure you do stretch position exercises. But you'd never say don't do a squeeze exercise ever. See what I'm saying? Case closed. Mike can still say use full ROM. And I like Mike's message, because he was always like, slow down the eccentric, use full ROM and control. If you do what Mike says, you're not going to injure yourself as much. And that's one of the most important factors with long-term, like joint health and not getting injured, is one of the most important factors that people don't talk about, because everyone wants rapid growth. They care about muscle hypertrophy in the short term, but what about 10 years from now, 20 years from now? My system has changed. I was doing strong lifting. My people got great results, but with me not there when I moved from San Diego, they're trying to PR on their squats and deadlifts when they have back pain. When I was there, I'd go, no, you're not squatting today. If you have any back pain, you're not doing anything. You're doing single leg movements. You're doing, hip thrusts, scoop method. You're doing band work. And guess what? You'll feel fine in 3 days and we'll hit it again, but you don't ever train through pain. That's my rule. If something hurts, it doesn't feel right, you do something different. You do something else that doesn't hurt. But with me not there, and we've all done it. We've all pushed the big lifts too hard and it backfired on us. So now I kind of have like a Louis Simmons approach, but he did it with powerlifting. I do it with my machines. You want quads? Okay. You want quads? Pick one and do it for 2-3 weeks, then pick another. But always know your PRs on all these lifts in every rep range. Louis was max singles. Mine's whatever load, any load you want to PR on. So you say you have 3 main loads at each one of these exercises. How are your quads not going to be big if you pick between pendulum squats, hack squats, V squats, belt squats, Smith machine squats? What else is there? Leg press, quad dominant leg press. And you could also have like a partial in there. You could have them with bands or without bands. You could have different depths. You could have you're at record with 3 plates, with 4 plates, with 5 plates, but you're always trying to PR at these different exercises at the different loads. You can mix it around, but pick one, because they also transfer to each other. when you're crushing squats, they all tend to go up. When you're crushing hack squats, your pendulum squats tend to go up. When you're doing belt squats in a quad dominant fashion, it transfers to the squat. They all feed off each other. And then obviously do leaning back leg extensions for the rectus femoris. Interesting thing about the rec fem stuff is with biarticular muscles, I think it follows a different pattern. We tend to say more length, more stretch grows the distal region more, but with the rec fem, it grows the proximal region more, and that jibes with the EMG and the muscle damage and the muscle swelling. There's like research on it, you get more muscle activation, more soreness, and more swelling in the proximal, the upper rec fem, and by leaning back on the leg extension. It's really fascinating.
It's normally the opposite.
It's normally the opposite. But anyway,
Yeah.
lean back and have the torque in the stretch position. That's why I like these plate-loaded devices. You can kind of move the arm if you have a partner, the plate-loaded leg extensions. I have one from Titan, and I'll move the arm up, but you can't let it flip backwards. So they can't come up too explosively. But you can do leg extensions and leg curls. And when you have all that torque in the stretch, it pulls you back all the way down. You're going into deep knee flexion. Also, interestingly, like with quads, leg extensions, in my opinion, I've had to look at all the research. They tend to grow the quads more the deeper the better. But with 2 studies now with Larson's leg press and Kubo's squat paper, the quads didn't grow from going deeper. So the vasties, so far what we know, they don't tend to grow more from going ass to grass. But the rec fem does from going deeper. Anyway, just fascinating things when you look at all the research. So yeah,
I just want to say, I think it highlights, as you do a great job of highlighting, how it is quite mixed. Like for the glutes, obviously we're highlighting that, but it's just like we need more biarticular muscles being investigated and seeing what that leads to. So yeah, it's again, it's not as black and white as I think some people look at it. It's not as black and white,
and it's fascinating, but realize this is in its infancy. This research is very young. It's 19 years old. This research is 19 years old with like 2/3 of it, emerging in the last 5 years. And here's another thing that I think is important. When you just take a step back, okay? Everyone take a step back. You're trying to maximize glute growth. Are you really going to say, hey, just do stretch position? How many sets at this stage of the game, I've gotten really strong at these exercises. I've been lifting since I was 15 years old. I'm 48. I've been lifting for 33 freaking years. I've gotten really strong for myself. Other people might not think it's strong. I've stiff leg deadlift 405 for 20, 490, 500 for 10. If I do stretch position work to failure. Oh, remind me to talk about lengthened partials. I was wrong about them being more fatiguing. They're less fatiguing. But let me finish this thought. I have to get to that. That's really important for me to say. I was wrong. Okay, but for me to set PRs and use progressive overload on and just do sets to failure of like lunges beat the crap out of me. Like when I get to a point where I'm lunging 225 up and down, like I do 2 sets I have to do lower reps. If I do 2 sets, like 20 steps, 10 steps up, 10 steps back, and I do 2 sets of that, it takes me 5 days to recover. And my girls are different. My girls are machines, but men can't do as many. I know the research supports that, but some of it doesn't. I'm just telling you, the men could never do the workouts that my girls do. They can't. It's just different. They're machines. They're cyborgs. We could not train glutes 3 times a week they do. And maybe it's because of estrogen or, not as much, I don't know, muscle. I've heard the different, like clamping down, like occluding the blood or whatever, like not as, but I think it's, and maybe it's because they're on specialization phases. They're not doing all the upper body work, the volume that we're doing, but like, yeah, we can't do anyway. I can't handle the number of sets they do. But if I just did stretch position work and I only did the popular stuff. I feel like I have a way better system. That's why I was hoping Milo would come to my gym. We've got the gluteator, but it's the way I do the gluteator. That's the machine that goes like this, right? It's the way I do gluteator. I put pads outside the knees, and then I lean forward, and they have to hold themselves there. So it's knees touching, knees to chest. The knees are to the chest, and the knees are touching. That is the best glute stretch you can get bilaterally for glutes, you know. And the gluteator is a lengthened partial machine. You're not using full range. It's a lengthened partial, and the fact that the gluteator does hip extension and hip abduction at the same time, it probably takes the adductors out of it a little bit, and the abduction component just makes it even more glutes in the stretch, because when you're down deep in the deep hip flex position, and no one will listen to this part, this is a very fascinating thing that no one cares to acknowledge. I've talked about this. We need to publish it. When I get down to the bottom of a squat, the very bottom, and as deep of hip flexion as I can, and I'm trying to push up against the bar as hard as I can, you activate the glutes like 15% of MVIC. They don't activate that much. Then when you push out, like if you have things blocking your knees and you push out in that same exact position, glute activity will double. In the lower glute max, the mid glute max, the upper glute max, even the glute medius, you see way more glute activity. So in my opinion, like, why won't the bros talk about this? They're scientists. This should matter to them. This should matter to every legit scientist. If I tell you, get down to the bottom of a squat, isometrically fire your glutes as hard as possible, pushing into hip extension, pushing up versus pushing out, you're getting the same muscle length, the same stretch. So if you believe in the stretch for glute growth, then you should be promoting abduction movements where you're leaning forward and then bringing the knees all the way in. You get more stretch and more activation. So Milo, Pack, Brad Schoenfeld, Mike Israetel, who else loves the stretch? If you believe that long length training is better for glutes, and I tell you, when you get in that deep stretch, knees to chest, knees touching, and I tell you that the glutes all right, because when you do a deep squat, I have to have my legs out. I can't squat narrow. I'll round over, I can't get as deep. But with abduction, you can kind of come in a little more, and you still round. I still round when I do that. But my point is, I feel a stretch more when I do the gluteator, for example. And also the gluteator just doesn't beat you up. You can do way more volume on it. So that should be, if you believe in stretch training, and I say this gets you just as much, if not more stretch, and even more activation in the stretch, how could that not be better for glute growth? So the gluteator machine might be amazing. Who's ever going to fund a study on gluteator versus lunges or something? No one will ever do it. I will die not knowing the answer to this. And like the Rogers, what is it called? They call it like the reverse glute ham, but they had an old school hammer strength. I actually made a post on this. Let's see if I can find it while I'm talking to you. I made my own machine that's like where the torque is hardest at the bottom. It's funny, Brad texted me, he's like, this is genius, like you're amazing, but I don't use it much because I would say 50% of people love the machine and they go, this is the greatest glute machine ever in the stretch. And then 50% of people injure themselves in their low back. Not like they just go, oh my God, I feel this all in my low back, almost as if you round in a leg press, you know? So we stopped using it as much. I use it from time to time, this one right here. I changed see that
Oh,
arm?
yeah.
To where it's like, yeah, it's like huge arm in the stretch. But that's a hammer strength that I elevated right here so you can go deeper. And then I added the torque instead of the plates being dropped like down below. It's way out here. You have huge torque. I modified that machine anyway, but that you could do, you know, if it doesn't hurt your low back, I can bust out sets of 20 there. But this is all because of my presumption that doing lengthened partials would be really hard on the body with compound movements. Here's what I've found. and this is what I'd like to finish talking about, the practical. I never hear anyone talking about the practical aspects of lengthened partials. But to finish off what I was saying before, I got to close this up. Anyone training glutes would say, how many sets of stretch position work could I do? I could do 6 sets of squats per week, hard, close to failure, progressively, using progressive overload, trying to beat your PR from the week before. And yes, you periodize that, but my point is, if you're using progressive overload week in, week out on these stretch position movements, it's a lot harder. It's easy to just go in and screw around. But when you're actually using progressive overload and you're advanced, it's really hard. Maybe 6 sets of squats. Throw in deadlifts. Okay, I can't do many sets of deadlifts. I do low volume deadlifts. Even when I deadlifted 650, I almost locked out 675. I did 605 for 5. I was doing 1 heavy set of deadlifts per week. 1. That's it. I relied on volume from squats and hip thrusts to grow my deadlift, but I'd do 1 hard set a week. And I'd know from my warm-ups how 405 and 495 felt if I was going to get something huge. And yeah, I do 1 hard set a week. But maybe if I used real strict form and, left some reps in reserve, I could only probably do 4 hard sets of deadlifts a week in combination with squats. Now throw in lunges. Lunges get me more sore than anything. Walking lunges get me, and they don't just get my glutes sore, they get my adductor magnus so sore, it's like I could pull it 3 days later. It's weird. Yes, I know about the repeated bout effect. I've never been able to override that. When I do stiff leg deadlifts, my hamstrings, when I get to a point where I'm stiff legging 405 for 20, 500 for 10, I have to be careful. You almost reach a genetic ceiling where getting stronger, you get injured. It becomes a little too risky. I did good mornings. I did 335 for 15, but I started rounding. I think I could have gotten 20, but I was like nervous because I was rounding a lot. But anyway, it gets dangerous. Bros like us, we want to be strong. We use progressive overload. Now you say, okay, instead of trying to just use stretch position work, throw in hip thrusts, throw in kickbacks, throw in abduction, frontal and transverse plane, the seated hip abduction machine. How could that be bad? How could that not be a good thing? How could that not lead to more longevity? How is that not going to lead to more growth in the long run? Like with pec deck, I'm so much stronger in this range than this range. I can always finish my pec deck off and got like 6 lengthened partials afterwards. How is that not a good thing in the long run? Rather than just doing only dumbbell flies, only this. I think in the long run, and I think if you ever want for any muscle group, biceps, throw in some concentration curls. It's going to lead to more maximum recoverable volume, with every muscle group. So if Mike Israetel believes in MRV, he made it popular. Did he even coin that? I think he coined it, right? MRV?
Oh yeah, that's his term.
Did you ever hear that before him? I never did. He coined MRV, then how could shortened position work not increase your MRV? So he only cares about MRV in this stretch position. Add in squeeze exercise, you're going to increase MRV. I learned that from you, that term. But it's like you're trying to maximize your recoverable volume. You got to throw in some squeeze stuff or the stuff that's not, or some mid-range stuff. You know what I mean? It's going to increase your recoverable volume, especially as you get stronger, especially as you get older. That's obvious to me. I think it's obvious to every lifter. So we all need to chill out and like not hate. I love every exercise. If people bash squats, I defend squats. People bash deadlifts, people bash hip thrusts, I defend hip thrusts. I defend bands and chains. I even defend cable pull-throughs. I'll say pregnant women love their cable pull-throughs. But I love every exercise. I've been defending exercises against exercise bashers since 2010 when I wrote my first article on the topic. 15 straight years of defending exercise variations, because when you're a real personal trainer and you train people in real life, you love exercises. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Lengthened partials, I was wrong. I thought they'd be more fatiguing. They're less fatiguing. Something about, I don't know if it's the diaphragm, intra-abdominal pressure, like doing full range is brutal with certain exercises. When you just do the bottom half or the top half, it does not beat you up systemically as much. I don't know how to quantify that. I don't know how you would say, because I look at this CNS literature, and they say deadlifts and like this stuff by like Helms and Zordos, and I'm like, squats, deadlifts aren't more fatiguing than like squats or bench. And I'm like, how? It must just be muscle damage. I don't know. I don't know how to quantify it. But what I will say is I only do lengthened partials now for my stiff legs. I only do plate loaded. I tested my conventional 1 rep max deadlift the other day and I hit 565. Kind of cool. I haven't deadlifted in ages. I can always pull 565 as long as I'm pushing. As I can go 4 months without pulling a barbell. If I'm doing plate loaded, we use the Booty Builder one now. We used to use the Pit Shark. The Booty Builder is better. Their belt squat machine, but we only do Romanians off of it. So, so you go as deep as possible, even round over your low back a little bit if you want, but you only go up to the knees. And I don't hurt my low back ever rounding. I hurt my low back when I round, when I lock it out. My body can handle the rounding when I'm just using lengthened partials. And I've never been an archer, a strict arch back guy. I remember doing an experiment in 2015 where I did like 3 straight months of only arched back everything. And then I did a deadlift contest that was in the gym. It was this Gym Revolution training systems in Tempe, Arizona. And I pulled arched, and I remember I got like 535 arched. It was so hard. And my third attempt, I'm like, screw it, I'm rounding. And I pulled 584, ripped it off the floor. No matter what I do, even if I only do arch back training, I'm always stronger rounding. So anyway, it feels so weird to me to be so arched. I always round a little bit, but everyone rounds a little bit. Even when you look arched, you're flexing the spine 26 degrees or whatever. That's been confirmed by numerous studies. You don't really stay neutral. But anyway, I found out that lengthened partials are less for deadlifts. It's hard because when do you breathe? You got to like hold your breath. It feels so weird. That's the breathing component sucks. But anyway, I love lengthened partial stiff leg deadlifts. My knees have been hurting, and this new paper came out talking about the adductor magnus, saying it should be called the extensor magnus. They used tensor diffuser imaging or whatever, like to look at the fascicles, and the adductor magnus is a hip extensor. That's why every bodybuilder has huge adductors from training quads. You do deep quad stuff and your adductors get huge. You don't have to do the seated hip adduction machine. The adductors are 1/3 of your leg size, and the adductor magnus is 2/3 of your adductor size. So you get huge adductors just training quads going deep. So my knees have been hurting. So I get down into the bottom of a deep squat and I just hold a 45-pound plate out in front of me. And I just do lengthened partials, pulses at the bottom, and I do 30 reps and my adductors get fried, but it doesn't hurt my knees. It hurts my knees when I go up higher. So I've been using lengthened partials as a way to they're brilliant. I love them. I've probably done more lengthened partials than anyone except Milo over the last few years. With delts, I love lengthened partials. My delts grew, not just from lengthen, but focusing on the stretch position. Like I do in the free motion, I do these crisscross, rear delt rows where you're like this, but you're stretched and they're out to the side. So you got the torque and you're right here, but you don't go here and keep your elbow straight. You just do a row. You can use more weight when you do that, but it's a ton of stretch torque. And I don't like unilateral movements. I want I want to be economic, So I don't like doing one arm at a time. I like doing bilateral. So you do bilateral, I go boom like that. It's just, and you're not trying to hold it in the squeeze because you're maximizing here. You come up and you stretch maximally. My rear delts grew. I started doing lengthened partial. I love the lengthened partial cable laterals. It's almost like you feel like you're almost just like flexing your delt. You're not really like coming up. You're almost like compressed, and then you move to here.
It's almost like a single arm upright row in a sense.
Well, I feel like also, but my shoulder was hurting. This is always fascinating training around injuries, and I learned that I could get in the seated lateral raise machine, I warm up, but you could throw it on the stack and I can do 30 reps, just lengthened partials. And if I get my body big, the stack doesn't touch down. So it's like under constant tension. And I feel like I maintain my delt size doing just little pulses. But speaking of, I've never heard anyone talk about practical aspects of lengthened partial training. We need studies on what's the best lengthened partial protocol. And I don't see these ever emerging. Do we do the bottom third, the bottom fourth, the bottom half? How stretched do we get? I think Brad told me about a study they're doing with isometrics. You can do isometrics just in the lengthened position and grow muscle really well. But is that for advanced subjects or just beginners? Because the sarcomere is in series component. But anyway, how do we do bottom fourth, bottom third, bottom half? I don't know how much range of motion do you need to move through, or could you do isometric in the stretch? I don't know. But, and then if you do isometric, is it overcoming or yielding isometrics? I think overcoming would be way better than yielding. Yielding means you hold it for time. Overcoming means you're trying to push against an immovable object. But also, okay, how do you progressively overload? How do you make sure you use the same range of motion? That's what I became a champion of over the years. As a personal trainer, you realize everyone cheats. Everyone cheats. And so you have to come up with guidelines. Like with bench press, touch your chest, lock it out. That's how you know it's truly progressive overload. Deadlifts, the bar's on the ground, you stand up complete with it, stand up straight, you locked it out. Squats, hip thrusts are a little trickier. The set goes on, people stop squatting as deep. The set goes on, people don't hip thrust as tall. But with lengthened partials, I was like, yes, I PR'd. And then I looked at my video from the week before and I was shortening the range. So it's like, okay, it's nice if you have the same setup with our plate loaded Romanians or stiff legs. You have the same setup, and then you come up to your knees or come up just below. Like you have to, that's the important part, because just doing lengthened partials or doing anything without progressive overload isn't going to grow the muscle that much. So that's a huge component. And then what about rep range? Since you're doing such a short range of motion, don't you need to increase the rep range for increased time under tension? Is a stimulating reps model like if you're doing such short movements, if you're doing the bottom third, should we be doing sets of 10 still, sets of 8? Like a set of 8 lengthened partial is weird with a lot of movements. It feels like it's better suited for higher reps. Sets of 10, sets of 20. With cable lateral raises, I'm doing sets of, like 15 to 30 with my lengthened partials. So it's like, if you do only lengthen partials, I found that they don't get you as sore. You get the repeated bout effect. I was wrong about that. I thought these will get you more sore. Even doing like dumbbell flies, only coming up a little bit. It's weird. I feel like I recover faster from lengthened partials than full range, which shouldn't be the case. But I have to say I was wrong about that assumption that I'm like, what are you going to do? Lengthen partial squats, lengthen partial stiff legs? Well, we're doing them. It's just you got to standardize them. So if you do them, don't just do them for fun. Standardize it. Take it seriously like you do the other lifts. Make sure you're using the same range of motion. But we do need to know what range is optimal, what rep range, what frequencies. Can you do them more frequently? Are you being damaged as much? All these things matter for hypertrophy. It would be cool to hone in on the specifics of it, because right now it's just a stab in the dark. We kind of just guess. We do that with a lot of stuff. It's going to take a long time, and that's what my goal is as time goes on, I think, is to try to learn more of the hypertrophy, like basically do more training studies.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Andrew Vygotsky, he said something brilliant. He's like, the strength training field needs to, because he's doing his PhD in like pain science, but he's like, it's this lengthened partial stuff. We don't know the mechanisms of how muscle grows. I'm sure length is a component of it, but there are other factors too. And all these factors, like with the glutes, for example, you have muscle activation drop off as you get in the stretch. Other muscles don't do that. Not every muscle does that. Like vasties, you still get high muscle activation in the stretch. Look at the MVIC positions when you conduct EMG experiments. They're not all in the squeeze. Some of them are in the stretch. So why is that? Why do muscles activate? What's the physiological explanation? Is that according to the optimal length, the optimal sarcomere length? Is that according to moment arms and leverage? Is it, we need to understand that activation at the different muscle lengths, moment arms, all this stuff. And then, and then the length tension relationship, all these things factor in. And then there's like a psychological component to training where you care about your squat. You care about women care about their hip thrusts. Hip thrusts are the bench press for women, you know? But when you're doing lengthened partials, do you push it as hard? Do you care about progressive overload as much on cable kickbacks as you do on? So there's a psychological component. There's a anatomical, pain, physiological components. There's all these components to maximizing muscle growth. And I just think we get very myopic sometimes. And in the grand scheme of things, it's more like, look, find exercise that suits your body well, and then learn the variations you like, and then get stronger at those over time, but don't get injured. Don't start putting yourself through the pain cycle over and over and over.
Yeah.
You got to make training enjoyable. You got to make it fun. Variation is fun, but there's a sweet spot. Too much variety, you won't see as much results. Too little variety, you'll end up getting hurt in the long run and injured, and it's boring. So I never mind people praising exercise, that you don't have to bash other exercise to praise another.
Yeah.
Bret, there was a lot covered there. I have so many thoughts. One of the things that I did want to touch on that I thought was brilliant that you mentioned was the talk about if you just do lengthened only bias training. I've heard Ben Yanes use this analogy where it's essentially like hammering your hand for 60 seconds in the same place. You probably, that's going to be pretty painful by the 60 seconds. But if you can hammer your hand in slightly different places, it's going to feel much more sustainable. And that comes down to that, having a bit of variety in your programming, not just exercise selection, but also not just all lengthened, like sissy squats. And I'm not going to do leg extensions. I'm going to include some sissy squats because they're better for hypertrophy. It's like, but the leg extension might be more complementary, sustainable long-term to your quad programming. So I thought just that variety piece was really great. And
you made me think, don't lose that thought. You made me think of something else, like, what if you want glute growth without the leg growth? How do you take the adductors out of going deep? How do you train the glutes at a long lengths without working the quads and hammies and adductors? But
the specificity of that.
Yeah.
The point of, and I think in terms of practical advice, I've spoken to a lot of people about lengthened partials on here, so we definitely have elements of that within the long form conversations, which I don't expect that you've listened to, because why would you listen to all of those? But they've done a good job of outlining that. I think and different people have different perspectives on this. Like Milo is not super fond, from what I've gathered, of biasing short position movements, but he will include them. You probably saw him, because you mentioned seeing his story. You saw him hip thrusting. Yes, so he will include them within his
Brad
programming.
Always say, Brad's like, I don't consider hip thrust a short movement. It's funny, our hip thrust shortened position, you do go through stretch. It's not as hard at the bottom, but you still have torque there. Ian Bezidis looked at the torque angle curves of squats, deadlifts, hip thrusts. You'd get torque at the bottom, just not maybe maximum torque, but you do get good range of motion too. It's funny because you can get to I don't know. It's saying it doesn't work you in the stretch and you're moving the muscle through a lot of range. But it's funny, is a hip thrust a compound or isolation movement? That's another topic. Everyone says it's compound. Is it compound? It's really just bent leg hip extension. It's single joint, but things move too. The lumbar spine and pelvis move. The knee moves a little bit. The ankles move a little bit, but the ankles, that's passively. That's not like you're actively doing ankle dorsiflexion on the way up. But anyway, that's a very good point. And that's what I hope in 5 years we grow to love all the exercise. And it's more about how to create the optimal program that's going to maximize longevity. Because I can keep growing into my, you can keep growing. Look at Lane Norton. All natty's still gaining strength. It gets harder and harder. I can still set PRs. It's just, you got to really focus on that lift. I can't PR. like I used to on 12 lifts at a time, but talking about more about longevity and how to not get injured and how to train in the most, because they'll say they'll say, well, training in the lengthened position is more economical. It gets you more bang for your buck. Why would you ever do shortened position work when that's what they love to say now. No study has ever shown a benefit in the short position over lengthened training. Like more growth in the shortened partials or something than with full range. And I get it. I get that argument, but what if you did, a high volume progressive overload study and you looked at injuries? But also that's more about how do you optimize muscle growth per muscle? I think you do need to throw in it's for more maximal recoverable volume. So yes, on a case by case basis, but if you're so concerned with economy, how far do we take it? If you're like, look, this is more economical, well, then why not just do 1 or 2 sets? Why do 3 or 4 sets? The first 2 sets probably get you 95% of your muscle growth. Why not say you want to be economical? Don't drive to the gym. You drive 30 minutes to the gym and then you sit around and wait for machines. You can be way more economical training from home. Have some dumbbells. I'm just going to do all dumbbell and body weight and band training because it's so much more economical. You do 1 set to failure of these 6 body weight. Have a chin up bar at your home. Have these 8 body weight exercises, and you can train for 20 minutes and 3 times a week and get 90% of your muscle growth. Obviously, people don't mind going to the gym. My girls don't mind training longer. My girls don't mind doing, extra training in order to max out. Then that's what bodybuilders do. My girls are like bodybuilders for their glutes. They'll do whatever it takes. They would, if I told them to have electric muscle stimulators and use them at night, they would do it. You know what I mean? If I said, sit in how do you stretch your glutes? I don't think you can stretch the glutes like the pec and the calf and the like hammies and stuff. You can't stretch the glutes that way. But if I said, tie yourself up in a glute stretch position at night for 30 minutes and then switch legs and do the other leg, they would probably do it. They would do it whatever it took, but they're not trying to be as economical as possible. My point is, to me, the conversation, moving the goalposts, the conversation should be about maximizing hypertrophy. And I think short positions have a place in it, especially as you get stronger and older. But it's all fun for me. I don't mind all these people that I'm talking about. They're all my colleagues. We're all on the same team. We're all passionate about muscle growth and the science of muscle growth. We can interpret different, but if enough research comes out, I hope people will change their mind. If enough research comes out, people will change. That's what I did. That's how I determine someone's a scientist or not. All right, keep going. Your thoughts. Did you have any more observations?
No, I was just going to say, on that point of like the people you mentioned, they've all obviously been on the podcast. And I think if you were to sit down together and you talk through things, you'd be on pretty much the same page. Like it wouldn't be this diversive. It's just, I don't know, the people presenting themselves online, you only get tidbits of what they're saying, or they're only showing, again, social media, you know what it's like, Bret. It's like you said, you can only talk about glutes on your Instagram. People think, oh, Bret doesn't care about the chest. It's like, no, you do. It's just, you're not posting about it because it's not going to work for social media. And again, these guys have to play that game a little bit too. So you get a bit of a perspective of them that maybe isn't actually how they think fully, or if you talk to them, you'd at least flush out some of these things. Certainly, I think none of them would throw out short position movements completely, especially if you put it in the context of, like you said, hey, someone's trying to maximize muscle growth. This allows them more stimulus under the curve, more volume. They're going to grow more. Certainly they're going to do it. So that context matters, I think.
I overheard a conversation Brad told me about he had with one of his PhD students, and it was really sad. Brad's anti clickbait, so am I. I don't try to use much clickbait and like when I see Mike Israetel's post, how to train the glutes scientifically, and there's a picture of hip thrusting with a big X through it. No hip thrusts. I'm like, why'd you have to bash hip thrusts? To make your, like, do you care that much about your popularity? Is it that important? Is money all you care about is money? Like that you're willing to, I don't know. I never went down that road. Neither did Brad. I won't use clickbait to say, well, I got him to click on it. Hey, and you could justify anything. Liver King justified everything, you know? I wanted people to do a healthy lifestyle, so I told them this was all natural. But I did a good thing because I got more people to be whatever, carnivorous.
He
And
certainly took it too far.
yes, you can take things too far. But Brad's conversation with his student, the student was like, if I don't use clickbait or like tactics to, you know, hooks and tactics, no one sees my stuff. Brad says, well, your integrity is everything and your reputation is everything. And the person said, you know what, Brad, like, easy for you to say, you already have the popularity. You came in at a time where you didn't need that. And I'm so glad. I feel so lucky that I had the following. And I wish these guys, because yeah, it pushes black and white, these statements that we didn't use to make these. You didn't see this as much back in the day because the scientists would team up against the charlatans and we could ruin their careers. Now, I just made a post. All right, I think I just got it ready to post it. But I was like, here's these claims being made. And this video got, 3 million views. And here I am, a scientist, the leading researcher in the area, correcting this post. And let's see if this gets 3.1 million views. It'll get 180,000 views, and I've got 1.6 million followers. Like, I just want my people to see it. They want to see my stuff. It's not even showing up. So before the social media, like TikTok came in and it was all entertainment algorithms, all your followers saw your stuff and we had power. And then we had power. So then our stuff would travel. So then the YouTubers and people so then you Google this person's name and it's like, this person is a charlatan and here's why. And no one likes Googling their name and seeing that the first 3 things that come up are this person's a charlatan. They're full of crap. We had more power back in the day. So I feel bad for these guys because you used to be able to get a following from being legit and not having to blur the lines and compromise yourself and kind of sell your soul to get more likes. It's a much harder. I understand it. And Brad and I talked about it. And we're like, man, thank God I came up in the 2000, like late 2000s, early 2010s, when your followers all saw your stuff and it wasn't just entertainment. It was like people wanted it. People cared about science. They did back then. They still probably do, but they're not being seen it because it's not as entertaining. Pseudoscience is more entertaining than science, and fake news is more entertaining than real news. So scientists don't stand a chance anymore. And it's now all about cinematic. It's about hooks and cinematic quality. You think Brad Schoenfeld's going to be like, okay, what's my hook? You think he's going to have a nice video camera and learn how to edit on, like freaking
Premiere Pro, whatever.
Pro, or Brad's gonna be on CapCut being like, the true scientists, they're busy doing research. I know that when I have a Chinese client and she was, Brett, can I open up a on like Chinese TikTok, but they have their most popular social media platform, I think, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, Weibo, I don't know. I think I'm screwing up. But anyway, when she applied for that, they said, have him take a picture of his diploma and his patent for the hip thrust. And then I did. Me holding it, and I sent it in, and they verified me right away. And I could gain followers quickly. I was like legitimized early on because they care about legitimacy, scientific accuracy. And I think that someone told me, if this is true, this is brilliant, but also scary. They said, I heard this like 5 years ago, Chinese TikTok prioritizes education for the Chinese TikTok, but the US TikTok prioritizes entertainment. And I'm like, if this is true, does anyone care about this? Isn't this a good way to like take our country? Like,
yeah,
I feel like we're in a lot of ways getting dumber. And now with AI, we're getting dumber. We rely on these things. We lose our critical thinking. And then, like I said, pseudoscience is abundant now. It's so hard to correct. So I feel bad for those guys. I feel bad for the newer generation of scientists Daniel Plotkin is so smart. How the hell is he going to stand out posting what he posts? It's
Tough.
sucks because it used to be easier.
Yeah, it definitely did. And everyone has their own kind of perspective on how far they're willing to push it in terms of clickbait and on what suits them. I've spoken to a few people about it. Like Eric Helms comes to mind. He's like, he knows he
Yeah.
could lean into that more, but he also is of your kind of era a little bit where he hasn't had to get to where he is, sort of thing. And so so he has a similar perspective to you where he kind of understands why some people go down that route a little bit. And it's challenging for sure. And yeah, you bring up a good point in terms of like people think about their nutritional diet and how that impacts their health, but then it's like your mental health of like what's your digital diet and how's that impacting everything. But Brett, I've kept you here for almost 2 hours,
I want to
and
respond to that real quick.
oh yeah,
Let
go for it.
me look it up. I think about this all the time because I don't listen to podcasts, not even my own. Like I won't even listen to this one. I'll share it, but I don't know why. I just don't like listening to podcasts. It's so slow to me. I can read so much quicker. But I wish I
Two
listened to
times
Hugh.
speed, Brett.
Yeah, I know. That's what I need to do. Um, I wish I listened to Huberman's podcast because that stuff fascinates me. But I want to say I wish I could do a study on this. One group does all the biohacking, optimizing, like all the protocols of like to maximize your, like you see this in the background, those red lights. I put that on to try to, red light is better than blue light. Those used to be blue. I have in my Florida house, I had mosquito zappers. They're blue light. I'm like, oh my God, my favorite color is blue. I always have blue light around. I'm going to put red light on at night. So at nighttime it's dark. And then that red light, red light is the light. And then amber is next. It like maximizes your melatonin production. But then when you fall asleep, you want it to be blackened out. Then pitch black is best for melatonin production. But anyway, this stuff fascinates me, but I sometimes think, instead of trying to be like tick off okay, I got a cold plunge today, I gotta do my breathing tech, I gotta meditate, I gotta do my breathing techniques, and then it becomes a stressor because you
Yeah,
have we're already overworked with social media. If you're an entrepreneur, when do you rest? If you are an entrepreneur on social media, you feel guilty the rest of your life because you could always be doing more. You know what I mean? You don't
yeah,
have set hours. You have to set your own schedule. And deep down, I work 10 hours a day. I'd do better if I worked 12 hours a day. I would do even better working 15 hours a day. And then at some point, you're like, no, I'm burning out. I'm getting irritable. No one wants to be around me anymore. I'm an irritable prick. I got to chill out. I got to smell the roses. I got to be present. No one's present anymore. We're all checking our phones. So, what would be better? Doing one group does all the optimizing and longevity hacks and stuff. And then the other group just does like, what would I like to do today? What would decrease my stress? You know what? I want to sit in front of Netflix and watch this show and veg out and not even, you know what I mean? I
yeah,
want to do what's better for your longevity, because the people who live the longest are not the people eating the healthiest or working out the most. They have better life balance. And if you're neurotic about this stuff, if you're tracking every macro and you're outside at midnight pacing up and down to try to get your 10,000 steps, and then to the point where it's gonna, you know, and like eating your 14 grams of carbs that you had left within your macros, and you're neurotic, that's not gonna be good for your lifespan. We need to be more flexible, have a sustainable system, learn to put things into the right context, prioritize social connectivity, and all this stuff is very important. But also, how the hell do you? I always think about another study. Sorry, and then I'll be done. I can ramble with the best of them. Okay, so one group does breathing techniques published in the literature, trying to reduce your heart rate. The other group, you just say, don't do any protocol, reduce your heart rate. You know how to do it. If I'm trying to reduce my heart rate, I'm just trying to exhale more than you inhale. If you pay attention, you can learn yourself. You don't have to do, whatever the protocol is.
sure.
Breathe in for, 4 seconds and out for 8 seconds. Try to do diaphragmatic breathing. No, you can probably reduce your heart rate on your own. What study on classical music reduces your it's like good for you. I don't know if they look at heart rate or what classical music does, but classical music can have a lot of like violin going crazy. Sometimes that can be like, everyone has the music that chills them out the most. It might be different for
Sure.
different people. You know what? Maybe it's nature sounds. Maybe it's brown noise. White noise. It's like brown noise is more like a fan, like. So you got to figure out on your own what relaxes you the most. What does the breathing techniques, the sound you're listening to can really impact you, the wavelengths, the light, all these protocols to make you decrease your stress and improve your HRV and things like that. And then ultimately, social connectivity needs. I always tell the girls, when you're at Glute Lab, yes, you're lifting weights, but the connections and bonds you're forming, you all have a blast here. And when you have a bad day, guess what? You come in here, you vent, the girls have your back. That's probably more important for your lifespan, this camaraderie,
Yeah.
than the workout itself. So anyway, I'll ramble all day long. We're going up on an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah. It's
Thank
a
you so much.
very interesting topic, that part of things, and I agree with you. There's such a thing, just like training, over optimization, where you're overthinking everything. And as we spoke about, like being a lab coat is great, being a kind of a scientific nerd in all this stuff is great, but you've got to get in the gym and learn through doing and just getting in the thick of it.
Oh God, one more thing. I just saw this post on the other day on Instagram pop up, and it's a younger guy. He looks like he's around 20, and he's showing his workout. There wasn't one normal exercise. It's like, have you seen these Keegan flaps or whatever? Like,
Yes.
it was like Keegan flap for the lat, and there wasn't one semblance of a compound or normal movement in there. And I'm like, man, you're overanalyzing things. And like, what are you going to keep getting stronger at Keegan flaps every week? You got to mix compound and isolation together. Anyway, yes, people are now overanalyzing the hell out of things. And I feel like I started some of this optimal bro stuff in 2009 when I started writing, but then Chasm really took it to the next level. But the TikTok guys run with it too far sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Some
Anyway,
sometimes I don't know if it's a joke or if it's real, but yeah, thank you, Bret, for your
that's
time.
what I was looking at. I was reading the comments. I'm like, is this real? No, it
Yeah.
was. I feel bad because I probably would have gotten sucked into that when I was 20,
It is alluring to see something different and new, and it's like, it makes sense on paper, and you're like, why are these bros saying that this is all rubbish? And it's like, you learn through wisdom and time and
Yes.
experience that, hey,
Yes.
there's more to this than just like textbook biomechanics specific, isolate every muscle. But yes, regardless, we can probably chat for too long and could keep going. I want to make sure, Bret, if people aren't already following you, I'm sure they are. Best place, you mentioned Instagram, YouTube. They're on you. If they're watching YouTube, they should definitely head over to your YouTube. You've got a good amount of content over there.
I already gave up on long form YouTube. I always come back and announce I'm back, and then it gets worse and worse every year for me. So mainly Instagram. I have someone else run my TikTok and YouTube. I don't respond to every comment there, but I do on Instagram. Remember when blogging was a thing? I used to tell people just go to my blog, but I actually want to start blogging again. But yeah, Instagram is my main platform. I know.
Yeah, I love your blogs, and I think it's going to get to that, right? Everyone's like going to get sick of this short form content, and they're all going to come back to the old school.
And also ChatGPT. I've never used it. I don't want to get dull. I write my own captions. ChatGPT learns from me, not the other way around. So you're going to have to, what people are going to want to know from the source, not this generic stuff that comes up. Because ChatGPT is wrong sometimes. You know that when you know the literature, it pieces things together. It tells you what you want to hear sometimes. People are reading me. My sister will read me stuff. I'm like, that's not even true. There's no research showing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary. Thank you again, Bret. Thank you guys for listening. I'll make sure your Instagram is linked below and also the YouTube so people can check out that.
Thank you.
And,
send me the link. I'll send it out to my newsletter. I'll send it out. I'll post it on my story. And if there's any, I don't know if I had any good sound bites in here, but I'm happy to collab. But you do. I love doing podcasts like this, Stevie, because you do all the hard work. You edit it, you put it out there, and then we just kick back. I spent 2 hours of my time sitting here in front of the camera, but you do all the work. You now spend several hours on the back end getting ready, uploading all that stuff, and then I benefit from it. So it benefits both of us. Thank you for having an evidence-based platform. Thank you for what you do, because, yeah, you've kind of emerged as the main evidence-based podcaster for the fitness industry. You know who the experts are. You keep the discussions going, and it's a huge thing you're doing, Steve. It's great. It's great to have you, and you're kind of unbiased, and you have everyone on. It just shows what a testament to you being a scientific person, and I can't tell you how much I respect you for that. So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you. I will put this out anytime you want to have me on. I'm happy to ramble. I hope the listeners liked it.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Bret. Thank you so much for the kind words. I truly appreciate it. That was always the goal of this podcast, was to be like that source for the industry. So it's just, I'm grateful for people like yourself that are willing to spend the time and give me that, because I know every hour of yours is, like you said, you're an entrepreneur. So it all matters. And yes, there'll definitely be some great soundbites to this, and we'll share that out there. So thank you again, Bret.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.